Welcome to Papa Genius on Urban Politics, as Papa Genius on Urban Politics. And today's video is this: why reparations, America's last chance. I'm going to make a really quick video, and it's in regards to, yes, reparations in regards to Black Americans that are descendants of slaves and the unpaid debt that is owed through the ancestors that provided free labor that helped establish America's wealth. And I wanted to bring to mind something that was very important that God brought to me, and that is, I hear the argument all the time that many civilizations practice the system of slavery. And you're right, they absolutely did. So did Africans. And the thing that came to me, however, is the cruel and intolerable practice that occurred through the transatlantic slave trade that landed here in the United States of America. See, in the United States of America versus a lot of other past civilizations where their slaves were able to earn money, like the Roman slaves could hold private pools of money called a peculium, where they would use the money to buy goods and purchase their freedom. So it was like a collective. It was like a bank, a community bank for the slaves that they held within themselves in a trust. And they were able to add to that collective and buy their freedom from their slave masters, and also purchase the things that they needed. And it was also a heading that was over that practice. It was called manumission. It was common in Rome. Owners freed slaves in wills, or slaves bought their freedom using, again, their savings. However, with the antebellum American slave codes, all of that was illegal. It was extremely, exceptionally rare and very difficult for a Black American to earn their freedom, to buy the freedom of their family members, and to even purchase goods for themselves. Also, there were laws that protected the slave under the Roman Empire. And that is, if the Roman slave owner did not acknowledge those manumissions, if they did not acknowledge the right of the slave, because the slave, they essentially didn't have rights. However, there were certain standards that a Roman citizen had to abide by, because if not, then that slave did have options to fight for their humanity. They could either go to their neighbor who was a Roman citizen. They could also relinquish their cause to the temples, which would embarrass the Roman slave owner, or they could also just run away and fight their cause in the law, in the court. They also had the option of becoming gladiators, if that was an option. Not everybody had an option to be a gladiator, but that was an option to fight your way for freedom. Here in America, there was none of that. You were not even considered a whole human being. You were considered 3/5 of a human in the American slavery system. And if we are a nation under one God, indivisible, under a Christian faith that believes in the teachings of the Holy Bible, then we have to uphold the same standard that God required all other empires before us. The Egyptian Empire, and the Egyptian Empire is heavily rooted within the United States foundational beginnings of this country. Almost in every area of our government or our private lives and religion, you're going to find something that relates to the Egyptian empire, whether it be our money, again, the secret societies that our nation's forefathers, like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and so many others that practice Freemasonry. It is rooted and grounded in Egyptian beliefs and practices. Same thing with the Roman Republic. A lot of what we do is mimicked from the Roman government, from their beliefs, practices, their monetary system. And the same goes for the Babylonian Empire. And all three of those empires are on the image that was presented in the Bible. And it was called the image that was going to be the representation for each nation that would rise and would be torn down by God. And the last nations consist of us, and that is us. We're down at the bottom of that image, that false image that Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, required his subjects to bow down to. All but three who were of Hebrew faith that did not bow down to that image. And we are part of those toes at the bottom. We're mixed in the clay and the iron, the toes that are easily breakable. Now that I've established the groundwork for my main point of view in this video, and that is, we can primarily all agree that America has a strong commonality or connection to all three of those kingdoms: the Babylonians, the Egyptians, and the Romans. And because of that, we also have a similarity to something which they also practiced, which was slavery. However, the difference between our nation here in modern times and their nations back then are this: those nations back then obeyed the word of the Lord, even if they were not believers. And what they did was to prevent curses and destruction happening to their nation. What they did was they allowed these slaves to leave their land with some type of considerable reimbursement that will help to establish them on their next journey moving forward. All but the United States. The United States, what did they do? They insulted newly freed Black Americans. Do you know there was almost 4 million Black American slaves that were logged in the Freedmen's Bureau? And there was a release of the slaves on the promise that there would be at least 40 acres provided to the newly freed slaves and a mule. Can you believe that? Not even a horse, but a mule. And just 40 acres, while at the same time they had something called the Homestead Act, where they allowed foreign-born Europeans to come into the Americas and to claim up to 250 acres of land scot-free, moving westward if they wanted to. After the slaves had provided them over 400 years of free labor and contributions to this country, even before slavery started, contributions as free people of color before slavery was even coded. And they insulted Black Americans. And then what they did was this is the chef's kiss. They added the Jim Crow Act. And that limited the amount of economic freedoms that Black Americans can experience within the Deep South. And it also mimicked other policies and procedures throughout the rest of the United States, like redlining, just discrimination in jobs and housing, and even for veterans, black American veterans that were coming back from fighting wars for the flag. They were coming back to a nation that did not provide them the same veterans resources that were promised to white American men and women. And that, my friends, is an insult. And when I hear of people talking like this, insulting black people, saying that black people are the absolute worst problem of America, when I hear stuff like this from this little nobody.
They were looting and carjacking. The criminals.
Yeah. Who are?
Mostly black.
Nick, you know,
Is that not true?
yeah, maybe, Nick. I don't know. I just don't. I don't know why you use the platform that you have to make that your target. Are you saying that the problem with the 26-year-old white kid living in suburbia outside of Chicago and his feeling of being disenfranchised is because there was looting and rioting in Minneapolis by black people, and it's black people that are doing it?
Yeah. I mean, the problem with Austin Metcalf was that he got stabbed in the neck at a track meet. And the problem with our city in Chicago is that the Magnificent Mile is gone. Water Tower Place is gone because of all the crime.
Nick, and the time of an entire generation of African Americans is that they've been getting killed by cops for decades.
That's
what are
just
you
not
talking
true.
about, Nick?
Because they commit crime. And listen, it's not...
Nick,
what?
That's not true.
I said the problem is crime, and we know who's doing the crime in Chicago. The carjackings, shootings, teen takeovers. We know why there's no business on the Mag Mile anymore, and it's because they steal cars, they drive them through windows. And listen, black people are some of the biggest victims of the black crime. But we're not allowed to talk about it because of the racial
What do you mean
dimension.
you're not allowed to talk about it? We're talking about it right here. You have a platform in which millions of people listen to you, Nick. You have an enormous platform. I want to find common ground of how much of a Donald Trump is. We can get there. We can get there. Okay. What I don't understand is how you didn't recognize that in 2016, and how you didn't recognize that in 2020, and how you didn't recognize that in 2024. Because Donald Trump hasn't.
24.
Because Donald Trump hasn't changed. Donald Trump hasn't changed at all. Donald Trump has been Donald Trump since he came out of the womb of a woman that was an immigrant to this country. And so, what I want to know, though, is that I don't know how we get past this idea that the biggest problem that you have with your personal situation and how you extrapolate that to the situation of other white kids that are your age, that feel disenfranchised, that feel left out, that feel they don't have a shot at the American dream, is because of black and brown people, because of Mexicans, because of Venezuelans, because of Haitians, because of, it's always other, Nick, with you, it seems to me. And I've listened to a lot of the stuff. It's always them. We need to build a wall. Where's the wall, Nick? He never built the wall. Why'd you vote for him in 2020? Why'd you vote for him in 2024?
I didn't vote for him in 2024.
Okay. My point being is that whenever you identify your problem as being something that is other, that you can point to, that's a minority, that is a group of people, that's the Jews, before, remember, all of us, it was the Irish Catholics who were committing the crime, who weren't allowed into bars, who weren't allowed into, because you know why? Because they were dirty, poor, non-Europeans. They were Irish. Every time it's wrong. Every time history has proven that to be wrong.
And Hunter Biden is telling him correctly. You've had a lead between 1619 to 1865. You had over a 276-year lead. Then we only got about a 6-year lead when 1965 to 1970 came about. Reparations is God's plan. Did you know about the king who did not belong to Israel, yet he was able to provide the people of Israel all of the money that they needed to restore the second temple after they were under their nation's bondage of slavery? King Cyrus also brought hundreds of thousands of pounds of silver and gold and other artifacts and items that were taken from the original temple, and provided it back to the people of Israel. Even in Egypt, it took the hand of God to allow the death angel to take each firstborn. When they finally saw the hand of God over the people of Israel, they allowed the Israelites to leave out of Egypt with all of the necessary wealth that they needed to start the first temple in the wilderness. And now we are the third. We are the third set of slaves here in America. And God wants us to spread the gospel. See, reparations is not for us. It's for God's plan. And America and Rome is all a part of this last Babylon that's in the Bible. And American slaves are due reparations from America, and not only America, but white America, because America has allowed white America to lead in the wealth, lead into the decision making, and they have caused the most massacres to set back Black Americans so many years. And until God allowed a second Pentecost to occur, through who? The American Black slave that was free. The second Pentecost happened in America back in the early 1900s during an event called Azusa Street. It was a deeply rooted event that occurred with Black Americans and the children of emancipated slaves. It was a spiritual manifestation that took almost 2,000 years to occur from the first day of Pentecost after Jesus was resurrected. It has remained a lasting impact, and all of these evangelicals that you see out here that endorse Trump, some of them came from that evangelical movement, but they left God and they've put Trump up as the golden image now. And now Black Americans still have that special gift, and only if America is willing to see, just like the Egyptians had to see, but God took their firstborns. America is now in the state of destruction. And that's why you hear people like Nick Fuentes and the other young white American men frustrated, white people frustrated, blaming their misfortune on Black Americans. How can you blame anything on Black Americans when Black Americans never had a head start in life? Whatever we've gotten from endurance and hard work. And it says, if you let go, turn away from your evil ways, and pray, and ask for God to forgive you for the sins of slavery, while you pay reparations to the people that descended from slavery. Let me know what you think. Please like, share, and subscribe. There's so many things I could have went into details about, but the main thing is this: know that Black American people are special people. And again, it took 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years, for the second Pentecost to happen. And where did it happen? It happened here in the United States with newly freed Black American slaves that were not properly compensated for themselves and their descendants. And what has occurred since then? Massacres, setbacks, more policies and laws to push Black people down. And now you have a subset percentage of the Black American community that you say is a problem, that's causing fatigue. Is it that, or is that percentage of Black Americans that are having to constantly deal with the ramifications of always having to collect a deficit for each generation that they are born into? And because of those constant deficits for each generation these kids come into, they're having to deal with starting off the race each generation behind. Now, how fair is that? Do you think you're going to see forward movement when you're always in a deficit, multiplied by all the way back to 1865 when they started off with nothing? Answer that. What type of economics is that? So yeah, they're always going to seem a step behind. And what you consider fatigue is not fatigue. It is called a deficit. Now it's time for America to make the deficit right. We don't care how it's done. Because if billionaires can walk up to the White House and demand compensation for failed projects, then black Americans are due what they should have been paid back in 1865.